In the digital metropolis of today, among the towering tech giants, there's a unique blend of coder and strategist who's scaling the heights. Meet Chris Long. With the brain of a developer and the vision of a growth leader, Chris crafts the digital future one innovation at a time. From tapping into user insights to spearheading sustainable growth, Chris embodies the fusion of tech prowess and forward-thinking strategy. Venture with us as Chris Long unlocks the gateway to mastering enterprise SaaS sales and product leadership. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Articulate This. This week we have Chris Long, who is the VP of Product Management at Axonify. Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining.
It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
So today we have a bunch of topics we're going to cover. The first one we'll get into is the evolution of enterprise sales and product leadership. So I'll just jump right in. So as a successful product leader, you've been in multiple organizations. How have you seen the approach to enterprise sales evolve in the context of startups?
Yeah, I'd say probably the biggest thing is really just the competition has gotten crazy. There's that visual that shows here's all your software companies in a specific industry, whether it's like marketing, technology, HR, whatever it is. And like a few years ago, is you could look at it and you could see logos. Now you look at it and it's just thousands of things, and you have to zoom in really far to see it. So that's really been the challenge the past little bit, and so kind of like something that we're all trying to figure out and address. And I don't have the exact answer. Like, it's hard to figure out like what is the right approach that works, but what we're trying to do definitely is drive more alignment between product and sales, make sure there's more conversations happening between those two groups. We've actually gone to the level of like for certain deals, we assign product folks to those deals, just so even they're getting into those conversations and hearing those pain points directly, and able to address a lot of them and work together on it too, and get that sort of like feeling of we're in it together. And then really like in B2B products, it's the user is always different from the buyer in a lot of cases. So that classic product-led growth is hard. Like there's a really high friction to trialing your product because at least in most of the organizations I've worked at in the enterprise space, you trial a product and you have all that enablement that has to happen. You have to get buy-in from a whole bunch of people. You just doing a 30-day trial doesn't work. So there's a lot more complexities and things you need to be thinking about. So there's a lot more conversations around proof of concepts or other ways to really demonstrate your value and help differentiate you in the market against all those different competitors as well.
So do you do like any persona mapping when you're helping pitch to these clients? How do you navigate? Because I know exactly what you're talking about. You could have 5 or 6 stakeholders, and all of them have different needs. So how do you cater that message to them?
Yeah, it's a lot of, as you said, there's some persona matching, there's some discovery that goes into it. It's really, I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but someone referenced to me The Art of the Complex Sale is a book, and apparently it's been around for a very long time. And it really dives into that. And it's something like it's on my list to read, and probably coming out of that will be an element for us as a product team to read and understand, because we're driving like a lot of the things we're thinking about adding to the product, extending to the product, and how we tell the story around it really is like directly like who we're talking to is really the key element to it, and how we're supporting the sales team and having those conversations. But I'd say, yeah, that's probably the other element that's really happened, like just the complexity of the sale. And who needs to be involved in the conversations. And gone are the days where it was maybe a bottom-up approach or other different approaches to selling, and now it's easy. You can jump into a meeting and like I'll share the roadmap with the prospect, and there'll be 10 to 20 people on the call from multiple departments, and you have to talk about each one of the different people, different story to each of the different people on the call and why they need to care as well there.
So how have you seen the role of product leadership change over the years? You kind of referenced it. Now you see more product people are involved in sales calls. Like they're depending on the organization, how they're utilized, they're defined differently. But how have you seen it evolve?
Yeah, So definitely being more involved in the sales cycle, getting to know Salesforce, Gong, whatever tools, your sales team's using. You really need to be good at that. You need to care about ARR and really understand ARR, and really build that partnership with the sales team as well. So kind of that key element of like, we're in it together. You've got your targets, you have your goals, we have it as well. I remember there's an article in First Round Capital years ago, and it was a head of product who actually set ARR goals for their product team. I haven't gone to that level, but like that's an element for us of like, we need to constantly be looking and thinking about that, and we can't just hand it off and pass it into another silo. The other thing too that has sort of changed over the years is there's a lot more overlap between product and company strategy. So before it'd kind of be like there's company strategy and there's product strategy. Now it just seems like they're very much overlapping in today's world. A lot of times it's kind of hard to tell where is that line between those two different things.
So you touched upon some interesting points, and one thing that came to mind right away was the role of product marketing, because I've seen this some places, sometimes I don't. It depends on, again, how marketing sits within an organization. But do you see kind of role of product marketing kind of solve some of these challenges that you have, or how do you define product marketing?
So I do think there is a moment that's happening right now where product and product marketing are starting to blend together in certain ways. And my recommendation has been for anyone starting off in product or interested in how they can develop their skills is get really good at the go-to-market side of things and telling stories. Yeah. Understand how to do product marketing, how to like do the enablement, how to do the storytelling, how to talk about the value. All those key elements to it are really important for someone in product role and that product marketing. A lot of the stuff that it talks about is on the product marketing side of things, and they can cover off some of it, but having that direct connection and product really caring about those elements, I think is important. Like we are, especially in the enterprise SaaS space, we're driven by sales, by our customer success team. And the closer we are to them, the more we understand their pain points, the better off we are. And in most organizations I've worked at, product marketing has been probably they've been undersized for the impact that is expected from them. And that's where I think for us on the product team, we can really help them out and help them focus in on what makes them awesome, which is really helping clarify that story and tell that story and think about the story that we're telling to our customers from a much broader overall level as well there.
I like how you talk about the alignment between product sales and marketing, because if you don't have that alignment, the danger there is that something gets sold that doesn't exist. I know people try to hit quotas and they have to do it's all done with the goal, like you mentioned, of hitting that revenue target. But once you have that alignment, there is that collaboration so that you could figure out the best way to package it to sell it in order to do it, versus selling a unicorn with lasers on it that doesn't that may or may not exist, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always hard. Like I know some product folks are very hesitant to share roadmaps or future things with the sales team, or plaster caveats and safe harbor statements and all sorts of things over it. Because you always get into that danger where it's like someone comes up with an objection throughout the sales process, and there's that opportunity to say, well, we're actually working on this. And now before you know it, you have a commitment associated with that item, which was maybe not going to be a top priority for you as well. And that's where I think it's like having that relationship with your sales team, with the sales leaders, helping understand like we're all like in this together, and I'm going to be somewhat transparent about these items to you. But I also need you to recognize that like, don't suddenly pull this out and make it a commitment without talking to me. Like, let's have conversations about this. Let's work on this together. And it's like, we're here for the betterment of the company, not just hitting our goals as well there. But that I think it's the big challenge. Like it's how do you sell these enterprise SaaS companies when they're all, or enterprise companies rather, as a SaaS company, when each enterprise company is a unique snowflake and they know what they want. And in some cases it's big things. In other cases, like the challenge a lot of times is it's the details. It's the nitpicky things that might actually get them fixated on. And it's like, then you kind of death by a thousand cuts when it comes to your roadmap and what you're trying to accomplish as well there.
A very interesting point, because what I've seen over the years is, we're going to talk about digital transformation later on, but the idea is as people try to become more product led and they try to take cloud-based technologies, and they try to use, configurable software. There's a lot of surprises as people move on to these sort of SaaS solutions, and they realize,
Yeah.
oh, wait a second, this client had this very unique custom setup, and trying to navigate that. So that is a real pain point. That's a real challenge that I'm seeing today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it well, like some of our customers that now and in the past too, I've worked with, like we've been one of the first SaaS products that they've really rolled out at scale. And that way of thinking about it of this is a SaaS, like there's hundreds of customers that are using this and like enhancements are going to come from hundreds of customers, not just me, or like that type of thinking it's new to a lot of these enterprise companies.
So what have been the most surprising or unexpected lessons that you've learned about selling to enterprises as a startup?
So one is timelines, like, and not timelines and like how long things take to do, which is absolutely like there's meetings, there's conversations, you have sales cycles or like even product conversations that take a while. Like it's hard to always have all those meetings, but it's the timelines that the enterprise organizations think about. Like when I was at Lane, we were working with real estate companies. We're selling to these massive organizations that they don't think in years. They don't even think in decades. They're thinking like 50 to 100 years. Like we're building this massive building that'll take 10 years to build, and we expect it to survive for the next few hundred years and us to make the money back around it. Like I remember one property manager I was talking to, and they're like getting super excited about all the smart tech they're going to roll out in their bathrooms, in their washrooms rather. And they had a 5-year plan to do this. Like it was like, and that was just the pilot of like this one building rolling it out. And they're like, yeah, once we're done the pilot, we'll look at the stats and we'll roll it out across everywhere else. And it's like, that would probably take close to 20 years for them. So that element is always a bit surprising. Coming from the startup world where it's like we pivot and we almost celebrate pivoting is like, you don't think about that when you're in a lot of these enterprise organizations and what you're thinking about and working on. The other is how we think about road mapping on a product perspective just doesn't jive with the enterprise space. Like there's the idea of long-term planning that I just covered. And as a result of that, like they're thinking out 6 to 12 months. Like for them, they set out their plans 6 to 12 months in the future. So when it comes to a new feature or functionality that we're launching, they want to know when it's coming so they can take advantage of it. And if they don't, like if we're launching it, we're like, so why aren't you using this? And they're like, well, our calendar is full for the next 6 months. Come back to us in 6 months when like we have the space to do this and the conversation, like we can have that conversation then. So that's kind of one. And like for that one, it's really like, it's balancing. Like we have to balance and be flexible in our transparency with our customers and kind of understand like where does the priority lie on the items that we're working on and maybe talk about the future, but say like, okay, this is a caveat, like this is something that we're not sure about, or this is something we're absolutely certain about. And then last two things, and we've touched on one already, which is the internal hierarchy politics, the complex sale. So the idea of like, there's just so many people involved, so many different actors. And on top of that, you have the internal politics across all those different things. So it's been like, you're in a conversation with someone and you're like, here's an idea of what we're thinking about. They're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. We need this. I'll buy it right away. And then they're like, oh, but you just need to talk to this person. You go talk to that person. They're like, no, don't need this. We already have this other product that does this. Don't like build this. And you're like, well, so you got to balance out that element. And then last thing I'll say is just the consumer playbook, like coming from B2C side of things, that doesn't apply. You can't run A/B tests in the enterprise environment. Like a lot of, if you're rolling it out to your customers, users in A/B tests, they're going to hate you for it. You just don't have the volume to run A/B tests if you're running it on your website or something else along those lines.
Yeah.
So all that, the playbook and the approach that you take to consumer products just doesn't apply in the enterprise space.
That's a really good point. I've been in those situations where the panic was, how do we know it's going to withstand our clients, and having to put a strategy of how to do a rollout and do a slow implementation to make sure that it doesn't crash is very important. The other thing I'll throw in there to add more complexity is that if you happen to be a publicly listed company, you have that other complexity of hitting quotas per quarter for your stock. So when you want to go long term, people don't care that far when you have a quarter to do. So I've seen a lot of challenges of trying to make the right decisions in face of, trying to hit that, quarterly target.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I thankfully haven't experienced that side of things in the enterprise side. I've been more in the startups side of things, but yeah, it adds a lot of complexity to it, definitely.
So let's transition to now, which is a good segue because we're going to talk about transitioning roles and skills development. You were a developer that kind of got into product leadership. So what are some of the key skills that you've had to acquire or hone to make that transition happen?
Yeah, man, it's now a ridiculously long time ago I was a developer. It kind of reminds me of how old I am now. But yeah, I went to school for computer science and started off as a developer and then moved into product management from there. And kind of what drew me more to product management, it's really that classic, like, I was really super interested and excited by the why. Why are we doing things? And I always needed to know those details. The what or the how was, it's good to know and it's good to think about. And it was a lot of fun, but it was the why when it came to my day job. And
Cool.
I still love the one, like how, like that's elements. Like I still do coding in my free time. I'm having a lot of fun right now creating a personal AI assistant for me right now.
Okay.
But that technical background, like it's been extremely useful for me and just making sure that like I can ask questions about the what and the how of what we're doing to make sure we're really delivering on like the why, like what is the value that this delivers and the impact of it. But the kind of key elements that touch on like influence has been key. So like when you're in product, you're kind of in that like the classic product role is you have authority. You have no authority rather, but you have to build lots of influence. You have to understand and collaborate with others. So it's really up to you to figure out how do you communicate with people. So you need to change your approach to communication. You need to understand, I'm talking to this person who appreciates this type of communication, maybe slide decks, this person that prefers async communication, whole variety of different styles of communication. I need to align to their goals, even understand if they care about goals or not. If it's a salesperson, it's their numbers. Someone else, maybe not so much. And then storytelling and really that go-to-market motion. You need to tell a story. And the storytelling comes in like it's early on as you just got an idea. You need to get everyone's buy-in that this is something worthwhile to do. You want to get them excited about it. You want to get every stakeholder to be like, how do I come to every meeting because I want to learn more about this type of thing that you're building too. We're launching it. How do we get the marketing, the sales team, the customer success team, customer support, all those folks super excited about it? And then that ties in the go-to-market, which we touched on, which is like, understand the go-to-market activities. Like we've moved beyond now. Product management it's been a long time, whereas like you could build it and just don't worry about what happens afterwards, throw it over the fence. That's become even more important in today's world. Like now you on the product side, you need to you need to understand the go-to-market and you need to even run with it and own with it in a lot of cases as well.
So you also kind of touched. My next question was going to go more about the solid foundation of technical knowledge. So
Yeah,
how has that played in your ability to innovate in the product space? Because I would imagine already having some technical background, you could help maybe even, I guess we'll use the word influence, or even help direct some of the direction you need to go because you know more than someone might know in that area. So how have you used that to your advantage?
it's so definitely like one of the key things I always reference is getting really good in the product role of you got to look at your feet to see what you're doing right now. And you got to also look ahead to make sure you're not about to walk off a cliff. And having that technical experience at least allows sort of some thinking and understanding around it. So it's kind of asking more questions around like, yes, we're making decisions right now that maybe build a smaller effort, maybe more of an MVP type of thing. But are the choices we're making now lead where we want to go? Or is it something which is just going to dead end us? So that's always been like extremely useful for me is really that aspect. On the flip side of things, it's absolutely like there's a danger to knowing, like feel like you know too much or you know enough about that. And maybe sometimes there's opportunities where you might challenge a team on something or question things and you kind of get like immediate pushback because you're questioning someone on what they're doing in an area that maybe you don't have that responsibility around. So you always have to be very cautious how you approach those conversations and what you're doing around it. Because it's very easy to get like that pushback from someone, or lack of trust even. Like they're like, you need to trust me. I know what I'm doing. And you shouldn't come across that way. So that's always like, for me, something I'm incredibly cautious about is like, as I was saying, I'm playing around with all this AI stuff. We're playing around with AI at work right now and doing a lot of things around it. I'm very cautious about how I say, like, well, I was doing this like on my personal side of things. Have we tried it here? And so it's totally different things. Personal side is like, I can do whatever the hell I want. I can have fun with it. I can do that. Work side of things, there's security, there's scale, there's all sorts of things that we need to worry about and think about. And just, being very aware of that and understanding that there's a lot more complexities to that sort of stuff that I just don't have the depth to really understand or think about too there.
So that's a good segue to the next question, which I was going to talk about more about, or I was going to ask you about, your technical knowledge and leadership. Is there a project where that's been challenged, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, I think it's more micro moments where it's been challenged and sort of have to work through it rather than anything broader. A broader one that definitely comes to mind is like, one of the companies I've worked at, reporting was a really big issue for that company. It was the number one piece of feedback we heard from all our customers. We didn't have a reporting team. Reporting was kind of ambiguous on who owned it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to own this. So went out there. We ended up purchasing Looker as our solution, working with consultants on it. And then that was going all great and well, but we're like, okay, we need to bring this in-house. So I hired a data analyst on my team, but they're just one person. So I ended up being like the reviewer of their code, their pull requests, helping them out on certain things. Like I loved it because I was like, yeah, I'm pulling out my technical hat. I'm doing all these things. But the struggle and the challenge and the danger of what I was doing was, reporting's really hard from a product perspective. Like, it's easy to come up with reports that just show a whole bunch of numbers. Really hard to come up with reports that show insights. And you really need to, I was wearing both the product hat. I was in a leadership role, but I was like pulling on my IC product hat and also pulling on my IC, I'm a data analyst building out these things and helping this person do things. I didn't do a good job at really either with those. So that was an area where it's not necessarily I was being challenged on things, but it was more of a personal challenge for me of balancing both those, and kind of more of a lesson learned of, it's in a lot of these cases, like, with something like this, like, it's almost like I should challenge myself. Do I need to own reporting, or is it better maybe in something else? And it's more important for me to focus in on making sure we're building the most impactful reports with the right reasons behind each of the data we're showing, rather than maybe having that danger of getting caught up in the weeds of, I don't know, how we're the certain visualization, or how we're doing our data processing with dbt and Snowflake and all sorts of things, which I loved, but probably not the best use of my time.
So now let's talk about strategy, research, and value creation. A large part of your strategy revolves around finding opportunities through data and user research. Can you share an example where this approach led to a change in your product strategy?
Yeah, I can't share a specific example. Like, there's been a few, and there's more recently that came to mind. What I will say more broadly is, like, there's, for startups, especially startups that are really going from that kind of few customers to much larger and looking to go much larger as well. It's a lot of assumptions and choices that have led to their strategy. And a lot of those assumption choices come from just a handful of customers or a certain vision and set out from that. And it's kind of the fundamental thing for those companies, like, to get to that place where they're going from being solving customer needs to solving market needs and growing to that bigger scale, is where they've been is in who they need to become. And that's something that's just fundamental for an organization, is like, we have this identity, but that identity doesn't work for us. So that's really where, like, you leverage the data, the user research, and you have those conversations with not only the customers, the prospects, the market, and you pull it all together. And that's really kind of been like a key element recently for me, where I've really focused in on, is how do we tell the story using the data to convince people to work against that momentum and gravity, to help shift the organization and kind of recognize that who we've been isn't who we need to become, and who we need to become, this is the path for us. And, like, we're going to leverage data, insights, and others to help guide us in those choices.
So in product management, we always talk about, generating value for our customers. So how do you measure the value and how does it influence your growth strategies?
Oh man, this is so earlier I said consumer playbook doesn't apply. This is one of the areas where it just doesn't apply because it's hard.
Yeah.
And we're having conversations and we're still trying to figure out what is the right approach for us to figure out that value. Because then the other thing, like I touched on earlier too, the enterprise companies, it's your users are not your buyers. And there's probably multiple layers in that too. So you have like certain users using a product, and you go up and there's the administrators of the product, and then there's the buyers of it, and then there's all their stakeholders associated with it. So it's hard to figure out like what is the value for each one of those and who do you really care about? Like you have the maybe the administrators that's the loudest voice.
Yeah.
And like they're complaining all sorts of things, but it's like the user that you really want to worry about and care about. But it's a lot of challenges in having conversations with those users to understand the value of it too.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, the data that you're looking for, the metrics of like the value you're delivering, almost always live outside your product.
Yeah.
So you have to have a really good relationship with that customer to say, hey, like, I want to find out about this and see if we're having an impact on this. Can you do that for me? So like at Lane, I mentioned the commercial real estate. Like for them, part of the reason they rolled out Lane was because it was supposed to increase renewals on leases. But leases at these commercial buildings are 5 years, 10 years. So it's like you can't really A/B test that. And they're not necessarily going to share that associated data too with you.
Yeah.
So all that like proxy metrics just become key. Like you need to really take a look at certain things. Like there's this chart that's I try to pull it up like all the time, and you have adoption and frequency. There's two axes on this chart, and you kind of map out whether it's each individual feature or all your customers with one feature. And its frequency represents how many days in the past 30 days has a user accessed this feature on average. So you're kind of looking for that depth there. And then adoption is a percent of active users who have accessed this feature once in the past 30 days. So with that, you're kind of getting like what you want everyone to be up is in the top right quadrant, high frequency, high adoption. And you sort of be thinking about and looking at how do I drive this in various ways. But it's kind of one of the best tools to really, it's not a great representation of value, but at least if you're getting high adoption, high frequency, it kind of shows like someone's getting value out of this because they're constantly interacting with it. And a lot of people are interacting with it as well.
I totally relate when we talk about the value that's generated either for like the administrators of the platform versus the end users. I've been in situations where you have to make the end users happy, and then where you sacrifice is how you keep the system going. So you may do a little bit more heavy lifting on where you would imagine to have automation, like say an administration, an admin console, right? Typically that should be easy configurable, but that might need a little bit more attention from the technical team to administer versus what the end user is. So that balancing act, I breathed it and lived it in the startup world. Makes a lot of challenge. It makes sense because you have so many stakeholders and where you get the value, the renewals, it's there's a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say like in a lot of cases that I always believe the right choice is focusing on the end user experience. Like that's what matters. And that's where you're going to see the impact versus the administrator side of things. Like the administrator, there's always enablement, there's professional services. You can throw certain things at the problem to help solve it. It sucks when you do, and you hopefully are not, but you can. The end user, you don't have that type of levers, that type of ability. And really, end of the day, the value to the organization is the impact on those end users versus the one administrator. If you save the one administrator even 2 hours a week, that still doesn't equate to you probably saving 5 minutes of all your end users and what they're doing over that week as well. And that kind of equation, it's hard to explain to the administrator because they're feeling the frustration, the pain point. But it's kind of a key thing for you to recognize, especially in the product side, and really balance that out.
So let's talk about navigating digital transformation and product development. We kind of touched upon it a little bit earlier, but in the era of digital transformation, how has your relationship between product development and growth evolved in your experience?
Yeah, I'd say like as an industry, product-led growth has really become the big term. Everyone's talking about, everyone's referencing it. And it's maybe less so in the enterprise space. Like it's a really, some companies are able to make it go in the enterprise space. I haven't had haven't been fortunate enough to work at one of those companies with like trials, bottom up, all that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah.
So for me, it's really in like we have touched on, but the product marketing, product management, and that understanding collaboration, and product management really understanding more about that product marketing side of things and providing the tools, the capabilities, and the support and help needed, and really understand like what is the ARR numbers, what is our goals, and how do I help you achieve it, and kind of recognizing, product's unique ability to sort of step in and drive that forward as well, and really be a partner throughout that process.
I think the challenge to become product led in enterprise is that you are asking the enterprise to change the way it has operated for such a long time. And the fear of trying to introduce something new while still make it measurable and still make it like you're really challenging the processes. So I've seen that at a lot of places, which I think is one of the main reasons why I think digital transformation has been taking so long and it's so challenging in enterprise, because what is the new system? How do you navigate that system? And how do you still have existing customers, existing things that need to be taken care of. So how do you introduce this new world? So it is a very every company has a different way of approaching it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, just even thinking of a conversation I had with someone recently, and enterprise company, large organization worldwide, and they're just talking about how they're trying to slim down their portfolio of software applications because they have each separate division and other things. Kind of like it was so easy to like roll out this new software, to launch this new software, and now they're at a place where it's like, I think it was something like 150 somewhat software solutions across their entire organization. They're like, they're all doing exactly the same thing pretty much, but we have 150 of them, which makes it next to impossible for us to like leverage it and to use them in the best ways. And they're really trying to slim it down. So it's maybe something I haven't thought about this from that perspective, but it's almost a thing against product-led growth in the enterprise space now. Is enterprise companies, these large organizations, are almost getting smart now about software buying. Like even in my organization right now, like if you want to buy a new IT product that's monthly, you have to go through IT and have a conversation first and just make sure that there's no other solution that's out there that's being used by any other team. We're only a 300-person company. So that's nice. I haven't thought about that angle from the product-led growth side of things, but I wonder if that's like a bit of friction on that movement of like the classic like bottom-up trials and that approach.
So I've seen that in a few places, and that what you described, I think part of the challenge when you have a traditional siloed organization, and I don't mean to come across as a negative, it's just the way they've organized and how they operate. They don't necessarily have to worry about the other group. And I think through being product led it's that holistic approach. So how do you do it? And it's easier for someone in their own area to say, I have my budget and I'm going to do this. But for the organization and the longer term strategy, it doesn't make sense. So having a place where they centralize it, ask the tough questions, and then you get into the tough part of why is this software better than that one? Like maybe for this group, this software does everything they need it to do, and the other group it doesn't. So then, trying to avoid multiple softwares that are underutilized, I think that's where we're in that space right now. I see the challenge right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. I have to think more about that point.
How do you incorporate, customer feedback in the product development process? Because I know we talked about B2C. I think there's a lot more opportunity for how to do that. But in a B2B, B2C sort of environment, how do you navigate that in that enterprise solution?
Yeah. So one of the first things really is, I don't know where I came across it, but I use this definition a fair amount, is the type of feedback. And there's really two types of feedback you're getting on the product side. One is the evaluative. Kind of makes sense. Like evaluative is like, here's an idea, here's a feature, tell me what you like, what you don't like about it. It's very specific about what you're trying to do there. The other is generative, and it's more about problems they're facing, challenges, things they're thinking about. There's a whole like kind of using that and you're generating ideas from it. You're not evaluating concept, but you're generating ideas. And it's important to recognize that distinction between it, and sort of when you enter any conversation or what you're thinking about too, and kind of recognize like, and kind of even like, what is at the root of what they're trying to say. And that's kind of why I also like that distinction of the generative versus evaluative, because sometimes a lot of people will say like, I don't know, with this feature, if you only move the button here, or like if you added this here, something along those lines. And it's like, that's evaluative feedback, but it's not evaluative feedback that necessarily adds value. And that's where the whys come in, diving deeper into it, understanding much more about that as well, which starts to shift it to be much more about generative of like, what is the problem this person's facing? Why did this suddenly come up as a challenge for it as well? So that kind of becomes like, you got those two different elements there as well. The other element too, like it's internally, we've struggled, every company I've really struggles with, how do you collect feedback from customers? How do you collect insights? How do you prioritize it? How do you make sure that they feel like they're being heard? It's not disappearing into a black hole. We recently rolled out a whole new process around how we collect feedback, collecting it from our customer success managers, which hear it from the customers. But with that is really around focusing in, what is the struggle? What's the workaround that exists? What's the impact? Leveraging a lot of those questions helps us really understand what's a priority of this, and helps us really focus in on what are the key things that matter. Because that's what's important. Like we've got, as we shifted to the new system, we have over 300 pieces of feedback, I think, that we haven't responded to in our old system, and we're working through it, kind of like, okay, we're committing to do this. But it takes time because we never ask those questions. So it's understanding like this idea from a year ago, like, is this customer really feeling the pain? Has it really impacted their business, our choice not to listen to this feedback? So we're getting much better about the kind of questions we ask, and working with our customer success team, our customer support team, on making sure they know how to sort of talk that language so we understand the right priority for these items.
So I'll just a couple of comments there. Like voice of
Yeah.
customer, I think is kind of the general term that people like to group this in. I'll even ask something as simple as product analytics. Like, do you understand user journeys and consumption of the product? I find traditionally that hasn't been implemented. So some companies do it, some companies don't. But just that basic of having to understand how people are consuming your product, and do you see where they're going, and maybe it's not necessarily using traditional e-commerce analytics programs, right? Maybe you need a specific product analytics offering, and it's interesting to me that is something that's largely ignored. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but it's not necessarily taken into account. And to your point, like structured versus unstructured data, how do you get it? Where do you store it? How do you action it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really, I'd say it's almost, we're definitely like, it's an area of, it's always an area of opportunity. Like, how do you leverage the data and sort of filter through the noise to get to like what is actually happening within the product, where are actually the pain points. It kind of ties in like the value conversation, that idea of where's the friction, where's the time we're saving. It's become a topic of conversation for us, of kind of that proxy of, are we saving this administrator those 2 hours a week by doing this type of change? Like, how much time are they taking to do this type of task, and how often are they doing this type of task? And kind of understanding like that's the friction, that's the struggle, that's the pain that they have within it, and putting some numbers to it just helps us tell that story on why it is something we should be doing as well there. But still, it's easy, especially for enterprise, of sometimes it's a lot of recency bias, and the loudest voice wins. And the more things you can do to actually make sure you're having a unbiased opinion becomes really important as well.
That's interesting when you think about implications of AI and how potentially that could help solve it. Because if we're asking the AI the right questions, it could potentially solve those for you by looking at it. But it's training the AI, implementing. I think that's where everyone's rushing to take advantage of it, to implement it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. I think I've had now 4 conversations with product companies that are trying to use AI to solve that problem of understanding, like in win-loss conversations and conversation, like pulling together all your data to really understand what actually matters
Yeah.
for these customers. And I'm really curious to start playing around with them with our actual data to see how it changes our decision-making process.
Yeah.
And hopefully helps to give that quantitative view on instead of recency bias being introduced.
One of my earlier episodes, I got the privilege of interviewing Sheldon Fernandez, who's CEO of Darwin AI. He's been at the forefront for a while. Since 2018, he's the one who kind of brought my attention and awareness to ethical AI. And then I started really thinking about the question of it's only as good as the data you give it and also the instruction you give it. So that to me was very interesting to see, because yes, there's a lot of potential in this technology, but how you govern it, how you train it is going to be key for you to really unlock the value. Because he always tells the story that I really love is the purple sky one. I'm not sure if you heard it or understand it.
No.
It's the one where they were teaching or they were trying to prepare autonomous vehicles, how to self-drive. And
Yeah.
it just happened that one of these tests, they did a series of tests. They were doing this in the desert where it's supposed to be safe in a way, but there was a purple sky that happened. And the AI recognized that when they see purple sky, they're supposed to turn left. So when they put it in a use case, when they brought it out somewhere else, the car started to turn left, and they what's going on? And it just happened that the sky is a color influenced the AI of what it had to do and what it needed to do for self-driving. So it's amazing how it could pick things up and how it determines it, but based on the data that it was presented. It was happened to be trained when the sky was purple and the heat of the desert.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's a story I was reading yesterday about training an AI to row a boat, and they kind of had like a point system kind of thing, and that's how they did it. And the AI figured out if it just goes around in a circle and just keeps collecting all the points, it'll actually win, even though it never finishes the race. So it's just like that idea of even how you reward success with each successive generation, that sort of stuff. And it's definitely the crazy element is in how do we know what's happening behind the scenes, and how much are we willing to trust it? And to your point, the personal AI bot I'm playing around with, it's changing just a few words in the prompt changes the whole interaction that you're having. And it's just 2 or 3 word changes. That's it. And suddenly things will break, and I'll be like, what the hell just happened? Why did this suddenly stop working?
On a positive side, where it's exciting is where we're seeing it in some healthcare situations where doctors were looking at data and trying to understand something. And then what happened was the AI was actually able to identify and determine where, let's say, disease or virus was happening a lot earlier in the stages where they never thought to look in a cell. And that, I think those types of breakthroughs are going to be, they will come. And I think it'll be very interesting because it goes back to it's only as good as the data we give it and how we train it. But I think its ability to see large scales, it'll be able to try to identify patterns faster and maybe uncover things that we're not even thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy world that we're entering.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity, a lot of challenges. So how do you ensure that the products you develop are not just innovative? So, with AI, same idea. They could be innovative, but then how do you know that they're actually user-friendly and not complex?
Yeah. Well, we touched on a little bit of your different personas. You need to think about those different personas. So kind of the tool I've been leveraging is talking about UX budget and kind of a fake UX budget. And for various things, it might be you need to think about, where do I need a good experience? Where do I need an okay experience? And where do I need a great user experience? And for any type of project you're working on, you kind of have that set budget. You can't just make everything a great experience. We're not, unfortunately, in that type of environment. So we need to choose, where do we make the great stuff? And let's spend the right budget there. And then let's sort of make sure we're still doing good and okay for elsewhere. And it's a difference between a setting screen. I'm on a tangent about setting screens recently with my team, because I'm don't spend a lot of time on setting screens. They're touched once a year, if that. We can support them with a help and guide, like pick up the phone, call us, whatever it needs to be. But the end user experience that setting screens drives, that's what I want you to focus on. That's what I want to be amazing. That's what I want to be great. So that kind of idea of a UX budget has really been like that, making sure we're moving very fast. We're developing things quickly. We're continuing to innovate. But we're also making sure that we're focused in on developing that like really awesome user experience around things as well there.
Cool.
And the challenge that touches on this, like in the enterprise space, it's configuration's key. You have that unique snowflake idea. So it's also that element of like making configurable like knobs and dials that someone can adjust is hard to do in a really good user experience, great user experience. So kind of recognizing that aspect to it of we can spin our wheels a lot on making this configuration really, really good. Or we can make it okay enough that people can do all the various things they need to do. And let's worry about that front end experience and all what those knobs and dials are doing and make sure that looks really, really good for that end user.
Yep. We kind of touched upon this when we talked about AI, but how do you foresee future of product development, in the startup ecosystem around trends or technologies? Is there anything there you're excited about that's kind of here or you see coming in the future?
I think it's a few different, like one is probably no one can answer that question without saying AI. Like it's just, there's a Jacob Nielsen article that referenced this as this is the third paradigm of computing. And that really, like, there's no other way of putting it. Like, this is a shift. It's a bigger shift than the iPhone and the mobile phone becoming a thing. Like, and it's moving so damn fast. Like, it's incredible how fast it's moving and how accessible it is as well, and how easy it is to make part of your product. So I think on the AI side of things, like it's changing how product gets developed, from the code assistance to even just lorem ipsum text is not a thing anymore. Like you don't need lorem ipsum text. Like I created a mock-up just earlier this week and I just went to the ChatGPT and was like, you are there, like this is the experience. I need text that says this, and it came up with something that was good enough for me to plop in there without me having to spend X number of minutes writing up something. So I think that's really, it's still yet to see the impact of this and what it means for us. And I think we're still early days of recognizing it. Like it's still chat interfaces. I think we're going to move beyond chat interfaces. Like in the same Jacob Nielsen article, they talk about hybrid approaches. And I think hybrid approaches is what we're going to see a lot more of. And we're still trying to figure out what's that right experience. And I have yet to see an organization that does that experience really well, a product that does that experience really well. We're going to start seeing more of that too. So that'd probably be, there's 8 months ago, I probably would have answered something very different, but today it's all about AI and just like every day it's something new, something different that's happening in that space or some new use of this technology that's driving something forward.
Cool. So let's now go a little bit more about you, learn a little more about you. So can you share a bit more about your role at Axonify and how your past experience are influencing your leadership and strategy there?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm co-leading product at Axonify. So there's two VPs of product and we both report into the CEO. And I have an awesome peer leading product with me. And we each have our own areas of responsibility, but thankfully we work really well together. I think it's actually been really awesome. Like we have similar principles, philosophy around product, which is really good, but two very different approaches to how we go at it and how we go about it, which allows us to kind of get that creative tension of we each believe like we understand and know we're heading in the right direction, but we're going to go at it two different ways. So we kind of work together and figuring out what is that best path, the best approach for us to take there. But for me, like, and that ties in with like my approach and where I'm coming from. Like for me, it's a lot of empathy. Like I want to be a leader that leads through empathy, and trust and transparency are really key with that as well. Like I'm transparent. I will share things, work in progress much earlier. And I kind of have the expectation with my team too. I'm on a personal vendetta against direct messages. I'm like, share it in a channel. Let's just put it out there. Cause I think it's so easy for things to end up in a silo. And when you bring someone into it later on, it's really difficult to do that. And the world we're operating on and the pace at which we're operating at too, like if you're off by just a few degrees, it's hard to pull back from that. So the earlier you share things, it's never always going correct. Like you got to be careful, recognize that, but you need to take every single opportunity to make sure you're not off by those few degrees. And for us as leaders, we need to make sure we're recognizing anything that's shared with us, what's the state it's in. So I always talk to my team about, is it a 1% thing? Is it a 10% thing? Is it 50% or 99%? Because that changes my feedback to you. Like if it's 99%, I'm not going to question the overarching direction of where you're going, because hopefully we figured that out much sooner. But if it's a 10%, I'm not going to nitpick, I don't know, the color of the button or something else along those lines, like, because it's not that detailed. I'm going to question, are we going to Mars or are we going to the moon type of level as well there.
I love the point about the direct message part of it, because I've been in those situations. I see it. I know. So how do you determine what's appropriate for the direct message versus the team? Maybe they don't feel comfortable or confident in their ability, or how do you guide them to say, hey, no, this is what we need to do, and build that sort of trust, I guess, to do it in a group setting, or even make sure it's appropriate for a group setting versus maybe you do need to reference it in a direct message first.
Yeah, that's a hard thing. Like it's so in that, if we were to unpack it, like there's the people being vulnerable of like, I'm sharing something in a public place and I maybe don't feel comfortable about it or confident about it, and anyone can read it. So there's that aspect to it. And for that, it's mainly like try to lead by example of being vulnerable too in a lot of those situations, and sort of showing like it's not the end of the world. Like you're going to get maybe questions or comments from folks, but that's okay. And the other aspect is too, as a leader, like when someone does share something in that channel too, don't jump on it. Like that's part of your danger, is like they don't want to put it in a public channel because maybe the leaders are also reading that public channel and they're like, well, we haven't come up with the slide deck or the document that sells it to them, and they're just going to jump on it. And so you as leaders need to be very aware of like, it's out there. Maybe you need to back channel it if you have questions around it and not respond publicly to it, but maybe go to like the leader of that person, the manager of that person, and say, hey, like saw this, can you just answer this question for me? Something along those lines, just so it's not feeling like you're putting it out there and getting questioned all the time about it. But the other aspect too that I think is really important with Slack for us to recognize is people are worried about there being too much noise in channels. Yeah. And the way I kind of talk about it is a Slack channel is a topic. You join that Slack channel, you are choosing to read things related to that topic. If it gets too noisy, you don't end up caring about that topic, you should just leave that channel. Like unsubscribe to that topic. You can always join later on when it does matter to you.
Yep.
But it's up to you as the reader to decide what topics you're interested in. It's not up to whoever's sending the message to decide who's interested in it. That's kind of an important distinction that I think we need to recognize is, unlike email where it's you choose who you send the email to, Slack is much more of a, I choose what topic this is about, and anyone who's subscribed to that topic can read this because they think it will help them do their job better. And that's why I think Slack is really powerful, and it's not part of, we don't talk enough about that part about Slack.
Learning how and when to engage and communicate, I think, has been a challenge with the advent of electronic messaging, email, and before sometimes it's faster to call someone on the phone for 5 seconds versus writing an email. So I think that debate's been going on for a while. So
it's only gotten worse. Like it's a challenge in today's world of like, I talk about gone are the days where you could just turn your chair around and have a conversation with someone. Now it's I need to find a 30-minute block for this person, and 2 weeks from now is that time when they're available. So we need to, that's a challenge I think we all need to address in this remote environment, is those impromptu conversations. How do we just quick 5-minute conversation with someone? How do we make that happen?
So a little bit of a tangent on that, but I see a lot more of return to work, and I see the importance of building that within a company or community that you have, so that you have that. But I don't think what's being addressed yet is that collaboration point. So right now it's just focused on getting bodies into the office, but are we bringing people in to properly collaborate, work in a proper productive workspace versus having people come there to sit on their computer and then go on virtual meetings the whole day. Like, where is the collaboration happening? I think that's the part that's been missing. I think that's where the tension is, because I don't think anyone would resist going in to work with their team. I think it's more of, I hear the comments of, oh, the commute, why am I going in like, for what am I there for? Like, give people purpose, give people a reason, give them value. I think they'll be more than happy to be in the office.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think that's really the key element. It's not saying the mandate of X days in the office per week or something on those lines. It's really about creating those opportunities where people come in and they're excited to come in. They're like, at the end of the day, they're like, I love my job. I had a great conversation today. And to do that is recognizing, like, it's not like I've seen some organizations do by team, or other things. Like, on Mondays it's the product team, on Tuesday it's the dev team, Wednesday it's the finance, like something along those lines. Where, like, no organization, you just have conversations with your team. Like, a lot of my day is talking to other teams than the product team. So it's creating those right moments and those right opportunities for people to be in the office, to have those really cross organizational collaboration sessions. And I, like, on those days where I'm in the office and I get that type of thing, oh man, I feel good. It's energizing. It's amazing.
Yeah. So how, there, in our world, in product and technology, you came from being a developer, got to product side, but how do you stay sharp? What things do you do to make sure that you are on the forefront of the latest research? How do you make sure that you are still, sharp at what you do?
So definitely, like, for me, part of it is just playing around with some of the stuff. So, like, I've mentioned a few times, my personal AI bot, I'm playing around with that. And that's just, for me, sometimes just getting my hands dirty and playing around with something helps me understand more about it, and kind of how it fits, kind of how it works. And that's the type of person I am there too. The other element is just taking time for catching up. Like, it's every morning I'll get up at 5 a.m., do a workout, read for a bit. Generally, I use the app Readwise, in their Reader app, which is like a better version of Pocket. It's actually, like, yeah, it's a great product if you're ever looking to read articles or other things. Read through a few of the articles I've saved, and then I always try to go for a walk before I start my day, kind of that reverse commute, and always a podcast. It's generally what I listen to there as well. So that's kind of been kind of the key elements for me. And there's always too much information, more than I can possibly read or possibly understand. So it's trying to be very careful about what I'm consuming, what I'm bringing in to my Readwise app, but then also curating after that point too, and kind of understanding, I might say something because it looked cool, but now it doesn't apply as well, which is always the challenge of that as well. So it's and the last thing I would say is having interests outside of the normal tech world too. Like, it's I don't know, my YouTube video list and recommendations is very eclectic. I've got everything from, like, city planning, transit, to international trade, to physics, to civil engineering, to all sorts of things. And it's mostly just because I love to see how things work, but also it gives me just some interesting opportunities to stretch my brain in new ways, in unique ways that maybe I wouldn't normally be able to.
Amazing. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining this week. For people who want to connect with you, where can they reach you?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn is probably the best place. Try to post there fairly often on things. And of course, I have my website, 234.com. It's spelled out TWO, 30 spelled out 4.com. Have a bunch of my thoughts on there, as well as other links on how to connect with me too.
Amazing. So thank you again for joining. And remember to keep learning and to stay curious.
Awesome.